This Kirblog topic was suggested by Otuff. If you'd like to suggest topics for videos like these, and if you want to hear me record them in my community Discord server before they release, consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/Kirbifer. After this Kirblog, you are gonna know if to an art college you should go, so let's find out with help from Ashley. You didn't expect that, did you? Although I bet you did, because that's what I do every time. Welcome, everybody. Hi. I'm joined by the lovely Ashy? Wow, good. Ashy boy from Pokemon, my favorite. Ashley Nichols. There we go. I promised I could speak English sometime. Say hi to everybody out there.
Hi, hello.
Hi, welcome. Yes, you have not been a presence on my channel since we did the charity stream. I think. Wow, oh my God, was it end of 2020? I think we did that.
Long
time
ago. Oh
my God, and we just did our first convention together at Comic-Con in Alabama with Michael, which was lovely. So I got a question, and it's funny. Good segue into that convention. The question that we got, I'm going to just straight up read it out, from Otuff on Patreon. Hi, Kirb. I'm currently applying for colleges, and I feel like art and animation are the only subjects I can imagine doing, but the college I've been eyeing for a while doesn't have any animation programs at all. I've been looking for alternative colleges now, and I feel so anxious from all of it. Have you ever had anything like this when going into college for the first time? Do you have any advice you could give? Much appreciated. Thank you. So, of course, it is well before the school year is up. So hopefully this is delivered with plenty of time to help in making a decision. But something that Ashley and I both share in common is that we went to art school for college. And we talked about this briefly on, it was funny, I just offhandedly pitched an indie animation panel at the convention that you, me, and Michael were on together. And just happened. And this sort of came up, and I was reminded, oh, you know what? This is absolutely a thing to talk about with you because you have a completely different experience from me. And I think that it is important, especially with just how everything in the art world is changing and just financially things are changing for everybody in the country. So I didn't want to just speak, with whatever level of authority I have on my own. So thank you for being here for that. I guess just to start, well, I'm sure people, if they're listening to this, they know who you are, but just give a brief overview and the relevant stuff to this topic and your art history, I suppose you could say.
All right, let's get into why I'm an authority, I suppose. No, but hi, my name's Ashley Nichols. I am an animator and a cleanup artist and a compositor and previs artist and all sorts of stuff. I've done a bunch of things in the animation industry. My first big job was as a lead cleanup and animator on Has Been Hotel, the pilot. I have done a million things on the Lackadaisy pilot and now moving forward the Lackadaisy series. Mm-hmm. I've worked on Too Loud for DreamWorks TV, Ollie and Scoops for Nico Kallio, and as well as the Animaniacs reboot for Warner Brothers. Am I forgetting anything? Oh, I also have my own show, Farfetched.
Yes.
That's an indie animated show. So I've been around the block with animation.
Yes, indeed.
I've worked for multiple, companies and, creators at this point. So I've seen a lot and I've learned a lot over the years, and education is a very complicated subject when it comes to that.
It's true. It's important for sure, but it is complicated, especially if you are working in the arts, because and I guess I'll speak on as general of a level as I can, because I wanted this topic to be more all-encompassing. Oh, we're going to address Otuff's question for sure, but I wanted it to be a little bit more all-encompassing because I think that it is important, especially now for the next generation of people that want to do what we do, or otherwise be as educated as they can on how to get their education. So I'll go over, if you're here, I'm sure you know who I am already, obviously, but what I'll talk about in terms of my history with that sort of stuff. I picked up Flash as my main animation tool in the mid-2000s, about 20 whole years ago in 2004. And I learned the basics of just how to work the program from a computer learning center right here in, or sorry, not right here, but right where I was in Long Island, in the summer of 2004, I think that would have been. And after learning a few things and doing a few little experimental things, I started doing stuff on Newgrounds for many years. And then my my like mid high school sort of experience was, I remember at one point I was so sure that I wanted to get into programming and creating and design for games. And two things kind of pushed me away from that path and onto the path of an animator. One, when I was learning Flash, I learned very quickly that I hated programming. Granted, ActionScript is not the greatest programming language in the world, although it was actually very useful, funnily enough, on the Tone game many years later. It actually kind of came into fruition there. But I didn't enjoy the technical design and programming side of games. And I had tried one summer, I think it might have been 2005, maybe, or 6. I enrolled at a summer program for a game design college. I think I want to say maybe in like DC or something. I can't quite remember. It was not DigiPen, for those of you who might be wondering. It was a smaller one. But I learned quickly. I had a good experience, but I was like, you know what? I don't really think I want to do game dev in that kind of way. I don't have the dedication for that. I realized I'm more of a storyteller and a filmmaker and an artist. So that's the path that I want to chase. So the following year, summer of 2006, I went for a test program for the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And funnily enough, it was not for the animation 2D major. It was for the comic book illustration major, because I thought at the time that in order to be a better artist, I needed to work in sequential art. And I also, funnily enough, realized very quickly through doing that, I didn't like doing comics very much. I love drawing, I love character design, and by that time I was starting to learn actual animation, but more than anything, it was filmmaking. It was the final product, all those things kind of combined together that that was really creatively turning my crank. So I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't really want to do comics, so this isn't the major for me. But I still, I learned, a lot, and the teachers were very nice. And I liked the experience of going to that college and being in the city, which, up until that point, I did not like being in New York City until I went to college and started living there for those 4 years. I decided to go back, so then later I applied for the animation major, because over the next year or so, then that was when I kind of first started getting on the map, quote unquote, with Newgrounds. I did the Parody Ranger series, and I think maybe I had started on the Nintendo collab, and I was still doing TTA and a lot of that stuff. So I knew that animation was the path for me, and then I applied a portfolio review with, showed a bunch of the stuff that I had done on Newgrounds and other art illustrations, and I passed. And then I enrolled to SVA from 2007 to 2011. I did 4 years, did my thesis film, and we'll get into the actual the meat of being at college after that. I'll stop myself there, but please, because you have a very different story from mine.
Oh, yeah. I started out just doing illustration for a long, long time. I had always been obsessed with animation ever since I was very little. My dad raised me on a non-stop supply of Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry, and then as a result of that, the rest of my family was like, oh, we're going to get you every Disney animated movie that's ever been made. And so I was parents. Just inundated. They really supported me in that. But then the moment I said, hey, I want to make animation and art my career, they were like, now hold on. Hold up.
Hold
that
up.
Doesn't make money.
You got to actually be able to take care of us when we're old. Now hold on a minute there.
They were just like, that doesn't make money. All artists are drug addicts. No. And so that was a phase for about a minute. And then my uncle had, a long heart-to-heart with my mom. Bless my uncle. He's so cool. Always been there for me. And he was like, this is what she really, really wants. Like, this is what she's obviously passionate about. And, this is a landscape that you aren't familiar with. I understand your hesitation, but you really gotta let her go for it. And so my mom was like, all right, I'm gonna force her to go to the shittiest college that I can find. And so I initially was kind of excited because I was like, oh, animation college. That's gonna be fun, I guess. This isn't SVA or Ringling or oh God, what is the one in
SCAD,
LA?
CalArts. Well, CalArts is the one in LA. Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't, any of the big cool ones, but this will be fine. And it was a very mixed experience. I met a lot of very sweet, passionate people that I'm still friends with. But a lot of my teachers were just completely apathetic. Like, they did not care. The highest pedigree of teacher that we had was a teacher who had an uncredited role as producer on Dumb and Dumber.
Oh, the animated Dumb and Dumber, the series.
No, the live action one.
Oh. That's wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a question just to cut in for a second because this is kind of tangentially related. If you don't want to say what years you went, because I don't know if you did 4 years, I don't know what stage of your life that was, if it was right out of high school or otherwise. But was that also? Did you move? Like, was it relatively far from where you were living? I forgot where you grew up originally.
I grew up in the Silicon Valley.
Okay.
So it was about like a half hour away from my house.
Okay, that's not that bad.
So very, very close. I grew up in the Silicon Valley of California, which is like San Jose and Los Gatos, Fremont, I believe, that whole area. And there were good schools-ish, but I guess to get into it a little bit, there really are only like a select few good schools for animation.
Yeah.
If you really want to like get into it.
The Art Institute, because if I'm not mistaken, the Art Institute is like a chain art school. Like they're set up all over the country, because I knew someone that went to one, I think in Vegas, and they shared some stories with me many years ago. So I remember when you told the story on the panel about, I went to the Art Institute, and immediately I was like,
And that's the trap that you can fall into if you feel like you have to go to an art school, and you're just pushed into whichever one it is, and there's a very, very high chance that it's just going to be a degree mill. Like, there are so many colleges out there, art schools or otherwise, that are entirely predatory and just want your money and just do the absolute minimum for your education and then just give you a quote-unquote degree and call it good.
Yeah. And this is jumping ahead a little bit, but to be honest, a degree, if you're looking at art and animation, a degree for a field of work that basically doesn't require one or ask one of you, like, to begin with. How many years did you go to Art Institute?
I went for 2.5 years.
Okay.
Eventually at a point I was like, this is just wasting money.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I only had a few credits left until I would have gotten my bachelor's, because it was on a quarter system, so it was an accelerated program. And I was like, I don't care. This is a waste of money. I'm getting nothing out of this. I do not want to be here. And every single time I would try and leave, they would pull in every head of every department to huddle in the office with me and go, oh, but Ashley, you're so close. Your work is so good. Think of all the opportunities you're missing by leaving. And I was just like, this is all bullshit. I know this is all manipulative bullshit, but I was a lot more of a pushover back then, and I just didn't have the energy to fight it. So I'd be like, okay, fine. And then a week later, I'd be back in the office going, I want out. And that would just keep happening. And I remember this very specific point where I think I just finally broke. The head counselor of the school was showing me on her laptop screen this really, for the internet and like freshman year of college or like high school, this little animation that would be, you know, good for that. But as a graduate film, it was supremely underwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
It was literally just like a little motion tweened robot superimposed over like live action footage. And again, no, you know, disrespect to the, you know, creator of that. It was good, but she was showing me this as like the supreme example of what their animation majors can do.
While they were done, by the time they were done with school.
Yeah, by the time they were done. And I'm like, I could have, I looked at it and I told her I could have made that in high school.
Yeah.
That's really what you're saying that I can get out of this. I'm already there. I had a really involved After Effects class in high school that didn't just teach us After Effects. They taught us Flash. They taught us Flash programming. They taught us action script. They taught us animation.
In high school? Damn, you were lucky. Wow. Oh my gosh.
And like, this was a public high school.
Wow.
Like, this wasn't even a private high school. This is public.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I got more out of my public high school than I'm getting here, why am I here?
Yeah, absolutely.
When I just told her, I was like, I could have done better than that years ago. She just completely was flabbergasted. She's like, and she had nothing to say. She just was like, well, okay then. And she started to get really like passive aggressive and irritated with me, and so I just left.
Yeah.
I just walked out and I never came back.
This was a staffer that was showing you this stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like again, the person who made it was nice, but like when I think graduate film from an animation school, you know, I am sure you guys have seen graduate films for all over YouTube. They are like stunning pieces of work that show the years of attention to storytelling and sorry, I just woke up like an hour ago, so my brain's slow, but
you're good.
Storytelling, compositing, like framing, character acting. You know, it doesn't need to be perfect, but this was literally just a robot tweening around on live action footage. There was no story. There was nothing. And that was her peak example. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm leaving.
I recall at SVA we had this thing called the Dusties, which was our thesis film sort of screening. Little film festival, little mini film festival. They'd run out of theater on like 23rd Street, and we'd all go. And I would go in the years before me, and some of the years after me as well. Because funnily enough, I think I've talked about this before, but Rebecca Sugar was 2 years ahead of me. She was a sophomore. No, she was a junior when I was a freshman. And Dana Terrace was, I believe, a year or two behind me, and Vivian was 3 years behind me. She was a freshman when I was a senior. And I would go back and I would see the thesis films that the different people would make, and absolutely be very, very impressed. It's like, wow, okay, this is a good sign of, you know, not only what you're getting out of the program, but what you're putting into it. But that once in a while, for sure, there would be cases where it would be something akin to that example you gave. I'm just like, oh my God, and this is after 4 years, 4 full years of education. There was even one, they didn't even finish it in time. So that they weren't even in the the program. They were doing other things and just didn't even put in the time to finish the final thing. So I remember that was extra embarrassing because it was like in the that we had little program guides, and they had like a preview image, and it wasn't actually screened, and I was like, oh no.
Oh no. That's always heartbreaking too, because like you went to one of like the actual good animation colleges.
I was very fortunate. Yeah.
Like that there's 3, and I'm trying to remember what the big 3 are, if you remember.
I mean, in the U.S., I feel like it's CalArts, SCAD, and maybe SVA, but there also might be other ones that because I don't know every single one of them. I only just learned a few years ago about Sheridan, which is up in Canada as well. I'm sure there's probably plenty in Vancouver because they do so much stuff up there as well. I was very, kind of going back to what you were saying about kind of what led you there. I was very lucky that my parents were always like, okay, you want to do art? All right, then you got to get the proper education for it. But also that was their perception of, yeah, you need a degree to do this. Like, you need to go to college. Because funnily enough, my older sister, Allison, who some of you guys are familiar with, she went to college she studied to be a doctor. And so she gave me a very skewed perception of what school after high school was like, where I'm like, is college like 10 more years? It's like, no, only if you're studying to be a doctor. But I understood quickly, okay, no, it's 4 years. It's another, standard 4 years of schooling. And I'm like, okay. And by that point, I had gotten used to going back and forth between Long Island and the city. So I understood, the commute and everything. And then I knew I was going to be staying there. I felt comfortable enough to be living on my own. And I had roommates in my first year. And then I was in a suite. And then I had my own room for the following 3 years. And I went in with the perception of, I need to learn things. And here's the deal, because by the way, this is also a distinct difference between us. Is, I've been fortunate enough to do a few things here and there professionally in the animation industry, mostly on the freelance, kind of smaller end of stuff. But I did the 4 years at a quote-unquote prestigious art college, and I have barely worked in the animation industry professionally as an artist, as opposed to you went to the quote-unquote scam school for 2.5 years, and we're basically already mostly ready to be working. Everybody's experience is different. I needed to learn stuff. I did feel that I needed to learn more and more things. And I did. I was very fortunate that we did have, there were some teachers that were not so great, but there were, for the most part, our teaching staff at SVA were fantastic people. They were great to work with. I had a few in particular that I really, really liked, that I took the classes of multiple times in a row. Celia Bullwinkle, who I don't think is at SVA anymore, but she in particular, she was my kind of central animation class teacher for 2 years in a row. I think for my second and third year, I wanted to be with her because her vibe and her style and the subject matter that she was, and even the stuff she was showing us, she would make sure to always get a model once a month on top of the life drawing classes we were already doing once a week. We would have an additional one just to pound it into us as much as possible. And to the point where, like, I want you as my main animation teacher a third time. I almost had her as my thesis advisor in my fourth year as well. But I went with a different teacher who had a different sort of, he had more of his eye on the writing. But I continued to see Celia and some of the other teachers that were there. And so I living on my own and, exploring New York City, the experience of getting to do that was a good experience, even though ultimately it did not get me a degree that mattered in the professional work that I have been doing since then. And it did put me into 10 years of debt that I only just paid off after, literally well over a decade. I just finished paying off my student loans as of the last, I think year and a half, maybe 2 years I finished. So, it was a long journey. But also I was realizing, from a few people that were like, it's one thing that you're going to school and that's great and you're doing these things, but you need to realize if you go to LA and you're going to be working, out here, you're not competing just with your fellow students you went to school with. You're competing with the entire industry for jobs. That's the level that you have to be at if you want to be able to do this. And that was a big eye opener of oh yeah, I know that I'm trying to push myself as best as I can to be as good as I can be, but that's what I'm ultimately up against. And the other reality that was kind of in tandem with that revelation was I was meeting more and more people that didn't go to school and were already working in the business. So I went on for a while. When you were there, were there any, I know that obviously it was mostly not great, but were there any particular good experiences or just even any kind of things that you did get out of it when you were there for the 2.5 years before it was like, okay, yeah, I don't need this anymore?
Uh, I'm gonna be totally honest. I don't feel like I got anything out of my schooling. My storytelling teacher was decently passionate. But like he would give advice and he taught us like, more about, the hero's journey and all that. And so I think I got the most out of that. But his way of giving notes was basically to just kind of cringe at you when you like presented your, story like thesis and everything. And so I never got any great feedback. My photography teacher was lovely. My animation teacher was okay. But with photography, like, I didn't stay in that one long enough because I was right around the time I was leaving. And then every other class was just like normal, like math, English, whatever. So honestly, no, during my time in college, I got more out of looking at online tutorials than I got from actual class.
See, okay, that was going to be my next kind of question because I'm not surprised to hear that answer. I also did, for better or worse, I spent a lot of time in the midst of class also doing my own thing because I was continuing to do stuff on Newgrounds while I was still in school. Possibly to my detriment. I don't know. I look back on that and I'm like, should I have spent as much time, doing my own independent stuff? Or should I have been putting like full focus into class? I don't know, but
I felt like I had to.
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
I was like, I'm not learning anything, or I'm not learning fast enough. I need to be looking at online tutorials and like doing my own shit.
Was it when you started looking for those kind of resources? Because again, I don't know the exact period of time when that was going on, but were there a lot of good resources that were out there by the time that you knew? I'm assuming it was the case, maybe say like you had a class and it's like, wow, I got nothing out of that, but I want to learn more about the subject. Let me go looking. And then were you able to find stuff?
Yeah, this was from about 2010 to 2013. And funnily enough, I actually ended up, after I left that first scam college, I went to a community college just because I was kind of like, I just want to take more classes and I want to see how this goes. And I had heard good things from my old high school friends. And they were like, oh yeah, no, our art classes are great. Like, we learn a lot. And I'm like, you know what? This one has an animation major. This has fun art classes. This is infinitely cheaper. I'll go here, whatever. While I was still like kind of starting out and getting myself established and like learning. And also my parents are like, you still need to get an education somewhere. So I was like, okay.
Right.
So I ended up going to a community college, and the head of the animation major at my community college was the director for the old 80s and 90s Disney Channel commercials. The ones where it's like Mickey's hand, like doing all sorts of like fun
That's right.
stuff, like
yeah, I remember you talking
made out of
this.
clay and like painting and like all that fun stuff. He was the director of those commercials, and I'm like, that is way more tenure than the quote-unquote pristine art school that I had gone to. And he would bring in people from all over the industry every week. Every single week. He would have somebody from Pixar, somebody from EA, somebody from Disney, somebody from a marketing company, like just anything he could find. He had a million connections. And he knew a ton of people, and all of them were like old coworkers or students or friends of friends, like, and he would bring them in to talk to us about like various aspects of various industries. It wasn't just animation. It was anything tangentially related to animation. And so I learned a ton. I learned how the industry actually worked. He was an excellent animation teacher, and funnily enough, he wasn't even actually an animator. He was an animation director, but he still understood the principles of animation very, very strongly and actually was able to teach me things because he had critique and feedback and he understood how it worked. Whereas my previous teacher, just you turned anything in, he'd go, "Oh, that's great." But this teacher, he'd be like, "Okay, no, your arcs are a little bit messy. Your like cloth movement and follow through and overlap are really stiff feeling. You know, here's what you could do." And he was able to do drawovers and everything. But ultimately, he wasn't even actually an animator. But I learned so much more there.
Yeah.
And so that was really fun, and I got to do that for about 6 months, and then they shut down the animation program.
No! Oh my god. See, that's crazy to me. I didn't even know that community colleges would have... Because to me, I mean, I look at, like, animation as such a, like, specified kind of thing that that's not something that I would expect to even be a major at a community college to begin with. But I feel like that's... I almost look at that as a cosmic, like... You know, the world being like, Ashley, you got kind of fucked over here. Here's a reward. You're going to a much more affordable community college, and there happens to be somebody that can actually give you a proper education on this.
It was pure luck. And I guess to go off of that and like kind of get into my spiel about how I feel about art education, if you can afford to go. Mm-hmm. It is a great experience. You will, if you are going to one of the proper schools for animation, one of the top schools, be sure to do your research and look into it because, you know, Kirb and I know which ones were relevant when we were younger, but it could change. Look into the top schools, look into who your favorite creators, your favorite showrunners that are in the industry. Look at what schools they went to, because you are going to want to look for a school that has a lot of connections. That is going to be what I've learned is the number one thing you are going to get out of college, especially animation school, is connections to people in the industry. Because your fellow classmates and the people in the industry you meet through going to your school are going to be the people that help you get the jobs in the industry.
Absolutely. And you know what, even to add on top of that, I will mention that is actually something that we didn't get out of SVA. There were, we did have lovely guests that would come in. I remember our animation history class and the kind of joke of an animation business class, huge quotation marks around that, did have very good guests that would show up. And they were lovely people, and we learned a lot from them. But in terms of getting recognized by them and making a connection with them, we didn't get that out of SVA. And the people I know, this is the thing, the kind of pattern I noticed is that a lot of the people that went straight into their first gig out of my graduating class, they just applied for a cleanup or animation job at the New York Titmouse studio. So a lot of them, they worked on Super Jail and Motor City. If anybody remember Motor City? Anybody?
Motor City was so good.
Great show. Great show. Absolutely. Yeah. Cut down at its prime. Yeah. Thanks, Disney. But yeah. And that was also, that was right when Titmouse was like, they were like top of their game. They were getting all the shows, you know. And, you know, but that was literally just they applied and there was the one dude that was the hiring guy that, you know, recognized all the people that did and did not. I was not one of the people. I was not, you know, unfortunately was not at that level of skill that I did not get that gig straight out of college. I lucked out with Skullgirls, was right out of a few months after I finished as I got that job doing that freelance. But yeah, like all the people that I grew to meet that are in the business that are out here, they're people that I met. They're people that I met at conventions. You know, and actually, you know what? No. Okay, I tell a lie. There is one person, and it was not for animation of all things. The one person and it wasn't a person who was on staff. It was a former student, and that was Ian Cordy. Ian Cordy graduated, I think, 3 or 4 years ahead of me. And he actually was Celia Bullwinkle, who I mentioned earlier. He was substitute teaching a class of hers one day. I was familiar with his work because he was doing a series called Knock Force on Newgrounds and Keen Tunes and stuff like that way back in the day. And so I just made conversation with him because I knew his work and et cetera, and we talked a little bit. And then I would see him and Rebecca Sugar at conventions, once in a while. And then when I moved to LA, he saw that I started doing voiceover stuff for, anime and some games and things. And then he offered me the gig on OKKO as an actor, That was really the only person that I met through SVA specifically that ever helped me with any kind of job, and it wasn't an art job. It was a performance job. So
that is such a wild connection too.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it was literally, I remember the through line of I would happen to see him like once in a maybe like once a year at a con. I'd run into him, and and then I remember when I announced doing Tales of Zestiria, he was like, "Oh, that's cool, congrats, man!" And then like later that year, KO got picked up, and he called me in, and I joined the union and etc. So that was the one and I met him at SVA. That was the one and only connection that I made, but it wasn't animation related. Mm-hmm. So even though we did meet cool people and we learned stuff from them, folks from Disney and Cartoon Network and Blue Sky, semi rest in peace as well. All these cool people, but in terms of making connections, no. I can't speak for if CalArts or SCAD is more commonly doing that. I mean, I know that CalArts, is often called something like the Disney factory because so many people, get hired by Disney straight out of CalArts. Mm-hmm. That was kind of, they were, directly related and everything. But that's the other thing is, and then other people I met, it was outside of that. It was going to Comic-Con San Diego in those early years of being in college and meeting people there and doing portfolio reviews and just, through friends of friends and just going to visit here and taking people to lunch or whatever. That's really all it came down to for me. It wasn't through college that I even made those connections. That gentleman, or I don't know if it was a guy. It's my bad if that was the case. But did you make connections through that teacher as well, or was it just purely learning stuff?
So I was very, very socially anxious, so I ultimately didn't take advantage of the connections that I could have made. Mm-hmm. I was very terrified of going up to the, guest speakers and being like, "Hi, my name's Ashley. Here's what I do. Thank you for the lecture. Where could we keep in contact?" Or just trying to strike up conversation and stuff. And other students were doing that. Mm-hmm. They were getting contact info and all this stuff. But I let my anxiety get in the way. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, when it comes to connections in college, your number one source of networking and getting connections is just going to be making friends with your classmates.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because your classmates, collectively, you all are probably going to struggle a little bit to break into the industry. But if you're working together and staying in touch with your classmates, if one of you breaks in, that is the door for everybody to get a chance to break in.
Absolutely.
Because the number one way that I see people get jobs in the animation industry isn't by applying directly. It's through connections and recommendations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The only reason I got to work on Animaniacs is because somebody that I worked on other projects with previously knew that they needed another cleanup animator, and they're like, "Hey, my buddy Ashley does a pretty good job. You should reach out to her." And they did.
Yeah.
Any time I have heard of anybody trying to directly apply, 20 times out of 22 they're going to be rejected. It's just, it is so rare to directly apply and get a job. It's really hard. I was joking on the panel that I'm pretty sure that they just put up job listings online as a formality and never actually look at them. Never actually look at the applications, because I know almost nobody who's gotten a job through directly applying. It does happen.
Yes,
it can happen. You should do it anyway. The worst case scenario is they're just going to ignore you, which is fine. But always apply, because it's getting your foot in the door a little bit, and maybe some recruiter that's going through portfolios is going to see your work and remember you. Because as somebody who's had to hire animators, I can tell you that I absolutely remember the candidates that have applied that maybe weren't quite what I needed yet, but were still great, and I definitely keep an eye on them. There are people who have applied to work on my show Farfetched that initially I didn't bring on because I just felt like they weren't quite what I needed. And then later they've applied again with an improved, reel and like more work. And I'm like, oh shit, you've really put the work in. I can tell you're dedicated and I really like how you've grown. Yes, I absolutely want to work with you. So, like, me disparaging directly applying aside, you should do it anyway.
Yes.
Because
yes.
you never know what can happen.
Absolutely.
But
I can't tell you how many times that's happened with voiceover as well, where people have auditioned for something I've cast and then they don't get cast, but I'm like, ooh, this person that didn't get cast, but I remember their audition being really good, and I remember looking into them like, wow, they're good. I got to keep an eye on them, and then maybe the next project or the one after that, and then you never know, it happens. Absolutely.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
That was I think that was also either right towards the end of college or maybe just after. That was another realization I had of that very thing of like, yeah, you can like say just as an example, like the Viacom website where they do all the job listings for Nickelodeon series and projects like that, and learning like, oh, that stuff goes to the bottom of the pile. It's always going to be prioritized when somebody else gets recommended for something, because
they always prioritize
absolutely.
recommendations.
And you know what? Look, I know that probably on some level you could look at that and go, well, that isn't fair. And I'm like, but it makes sense. It does make sense because like, if you need a recommendation from someone who's already working at your studio or on your projects, oh, I know this person, I worked with them on something else, or to even put that word in of like, hey, they don't have any professional credits, but they're really good. Here's their portfolio. Here's their Twitter. Here's their DeviantArt or whatever.
To put it into perspective for recruiters, it's kind of like being told, okay, you have to pick a friend to hang out with for the next possibly 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you pick a random stranger on the street who says, hi, I want to be your friend? Or do you pick somebody who's friends already with a friend of yours?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
very so much.
like it's just you. When it comes in through a recommendation, you know that you can rely on that person a little bit more. You have a better chance of being able to rely on them a little bit more. And so that's why I say, like, if you're going to go to animation college, the number one thing that you are going to get out of it, because ultimately you can get a great education, but a lot of that stuff you can also learn online. So focusing on making friends with your peers and any like speakers and, anybody that you meet is so important, because those friends are going to be the people that help you get into the industry. And that is a much easier avenue than directly applying.
Absolutely. A thing that I've often said for many years, I'm surprised I actually didn't say this on the panel because I think it's still true. Even it's a very generalized way of saying this, but I've always said that in arguably any business, the two things that you have to be to work in anything are good at what you do and a cool person to be around. And by when I say cool, I don't mean like, hey, yeah, like too cool for school. I just mean like cool. Like just people enjoy being around you for long periods of time.
Be easy to work with.
Absolutely.
Be nice and easy to work with, because honestly, you could be the most talented animator in the world, but if you are an asshole who can't communicate, nobody will hire you.
Yeah, or your margin of people that will hire you, will be much smaller for sure.
The only way you can get away with being an impossible asshole to work with is if you're animating, like, say, James Baxter, who is a wonderful person, I should add. I'm not saying that he's a bad person, but I'm saying
that level of skill. Yeah,
you'd have to have that level of skill to get away with that. And thankfully, James Baxter, bless him, also wonderful to work with.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I know that's the funny thing is the majority of like the old, classic amazing dudes, they're all stand-up folks, generally, which is good. And
can I go on a tangent for a second?
Please,
speaking about like teachers and guest talks and stuff.
Please.
One of my friends, their parents were teachers at a college, and they managed to grab Glenn Keane for a lecture at the college that they had. And apparently, and I love this story because it's so eye-opening, when it was right before Glenn's time to come out to the class and like give his lecture, and they walked out into the hallway and he was just sitting there so nervous, like shaking.
Aww.
Like just, oh no, what if I have nothing good to teach them? I don't I don't know if I'm good enough to talk to them. Like, Glenn, you animated on Beauty and the Beast, which got the best picture. Did it win best picture or did it get nominated?
I think it was at least
won.
Nominated, or maybe
okay,
yeah,
at least nominated. I can't
yeah.
remember. But like, you are one of the best animators in the world. What are you talking about? But he was so nervous. He didn't feel like qualified or good enough or just all this stuff. He was so scared. He was like, I don't know if I have anything to teach them. And it's just absolutely incredible to me. So I guess as a tangent, that goes to show anybody can have imposter syndrome.
Oh,
so
I mean, yeah, no, we're
do
all
not listen
artists.
to your imposter syndrome.
Inner evil voice. Yeah, no, I kind of on the same tangent. We had a Tom Cito, who's another classic Disney animator, who actually went to SVA in the 70s and then went on to work on Beauty and the Beast as well, and Little Mermaid and all that kind of stuff. And I remember he was one of the most fun guests, great sense of humor, very cool. And we had an opportunity at the end to ask, like, just kind of whatever, just for fun. And we asked about okay, the Little Mermaid, like rumors about certain things. And he's like, okay, it was his leg. The priest with the quote-unquote boner, it was his leg just poking through. I swear to you. And we were like, okay, what about the the spire on the VHS cover? And he's like, that was true. He's like, that was, I believe, a French artist who was on his way out. I think that was like his last thing before he was fired, and that was his middle finger back to the man. And I'm like, wow. So that's what I got in my education, was, dispelling Disney rumors. There was something I was going to say like 5 subjects ago about some of this stuff, and I'm losing it. Yes, I remember now. Something else. Okay, you know what? No, because I haven't established. What years were you in college for?
I went to AI from, I believe, 2010 to 2012, and then from 2012 to 2013 is when I did the community college.
Right. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So because you're a little younger than I am. I finished in 2011. So one of the big things that changed a lot throughout kind of the combination of both your and my eras during college was the advent of getting your stuff known on the internet. Because that was happening, before that in the early 2000s here and there. But I almost feel like it was kind of discouraged from people.
No,
at the
it
time.
was.
Yeah.
No, I remember my teachers being like, no, don't post your stuff on the internet. You're not going to find any jobs on the internet. Don't do fan art. Companies think that's super unprofessional.
God, yeah.
Like, all that stuff. All that advice, completely wrong. The opposite is true, in fact. Almost everybody I know that has gotten jobs through the internet is because they post fan art, or they post, like, their reels on YouTube, or they do stuff on Newgrounds. Like, posting your stuff online and doing fan art is an excellent way to get noticed by
Absolutely.
companies.
I recall specifically when we were doing our thesis films, which, we, at least, people in my year, we all spent so much time. A lot of people at SVA in the years before and after me and with me, we put our so much effort into these films because it was meant to be like our piece of, okay, if we are going to apply for stuff, or if we're going to talk to somebody in the business and show them, here is everything that I'm capable of, here's my thesis film, but I remember we were told, do not put it on YouTube. Don't put it on YouTube. Only if you're going to have it online anywhere, put it on Vimeo and have it privated, because if you want to submit to, at the time, because this goes to show, this era was kind of, changing, is the whole sort of model back then was you would submit your thesis film to an animation film festival. And at a place like that, there would be decision makers and, folks that would help with getting you connections to studios, going to those kind of events. And then if, oh, wow, that one was really good, I got to find out who did that. Where meanwhile, what was already, I was watching change in real time. What was that? It was I can't remember the name of the artist that did it, but it was, this is a story from North America, about the spiders. And it was all like crazy, like kind of pencil sketchy stuff. It was all like musical and everything. I remember Penn Ward on a panel was like, we're trying to find the dude that made that because we want to work with them from a thing that they put on YouTube in like, I think the maybe late 2000s. And I will never forget at Comic-Con, which again I went to try and make connections, and met Penn Ward right before Adventure Time happened. As it was kind of in the early stages of it. I remember that being brought up on a panel full of thousands of people at Comic-Con San Diego, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this is changing immediately. This is not exactly how the people at school are saying this is the case. So and what we have is that, you and I were from the DeviantArt and Twitter and, Tumblr era of putting all of our stuff, everything that we ever do virtually online. And, that led us to, where we are now also in terms of our following. Because I would even argue even having, not necessarily in every case, but even having a following, I think is important for getting jobs. Not even out of like, popularity or whatever, but just like being known and being thought of in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. It just kind of gives you more visibility. It's definitely not necessary, but it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
It definitely helps.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, so, I said earlier, if you can afford to go to college, make sure that you're going to the top ones where you're going to be able to make a lot of connections. However, if you can't afford it, all of this is to say you don't have to go.
Yeah.
You do. Art college, art school is not necessary. It's helpful if you're able to go to one that gets you connections, but almost everything you would learn from art school, you can learn online. I would recommend going to a community college for a little bit for like some business classes and like other just generalized classes, because the one thing us artists need help on is business and doing taxes and managing ourselves and everything. And that you have a very hard time learning online. That is one of the things that you definitely will need a little bit of help on. And I also recommend going to a community college for like life drawing and, general stuff like that. That is, again, harder to do online. But for animation specifically, if you cannot afford to go to college, it is not worth the debt most times.
Yeah.
And again, this is all generalized. Your individual journeys are going to be different. But do not put yourself in a ton of debt with the hope that you might make it into the animation industry, because one, it doesn't pay super well. So even if you do make it in, you're going to be struggling with those debts for a while. And two, it is just such a gamble, such a gamble. And you can learn just a lot of that stuff on the internet. You can make connections through the internet. You do not feel bad if you cannot go, because if you work hard enough and you prove that you are a kind person who is easy to work with, that is dedicated and have the skills, you can still absolutely make it in the industry. I know so many people who have zero art education that are in the industry right now. But unfortunately, I also know a ton of people who went to a quote-unquote animation school or an art school that really was just, we have somebody who kind of knows what they're doing, pumping out degrees, and none of them have jobs in the industry, or at least consistent work in the industry, and they all have a ton of debt, and it's just a miserable, miserable place to be. So you have to be very, very careful. But like I said, if you can afford to go, it's a fantastic experience and you'll learn a lot, but it's not required.
Yeah.
To like show how not required it is, I have applied for a bunch of jobs and I have worked, with a bunch of people and companies and all that. Not a single one has ever asked what my education is. Not a one.
I remember the Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls, once talked about how, especially because I think he went to Cal Arts, and then he was talking about when he had to, suddenly be the one giving jobs to people on his show. And he's like, yeah, like none of us care. Us caring about like what school you went to is almost like caring about like what kind of like marker you draw with or something. Like it's not about that. That's the same thing. It's also kind of generalized, but it's true. It really doesn't matter. In fact, I'll rest my case on this too. I even remember once, a very long time ago, there was I think it was like a game jam or something like that a friend of mine was on, and there was 4 people, and all of them were independent artists, independently trained, taught themselves stuff or learned, otherwise. And there was only one of them that I think had went to like an actual school for whatever their particular subject was, and that person ended up being the least helpful on the project. And even seemed to kind of be like, well, I went to, whatever. And it's like, cool, that's not helping us get the thing done. And that was just that specific thing. But again, when I heard that, I'm just like, okay, yeah, it's not about your diploma. It's not about flashing your diploma.
Your education is not going to make you a good artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not. It is a tool to help you, for sure. It's a place to learn. But if you're not taking advantage of that, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Yes, that was what I was going to say too. Is why I was saying earlier about how part of me kind of does regret spending as much time as I did doing. Even though I had fun with my independent stuff on doing my Newgrounds things and everything, I look back and sometimes I wish that I was 100% focused on just schoolwork. I did everything that was required of me, and like in my final year of school, I put like 100,000,000% effort into my thesis film and applied everything that I learned. But even then, I'm like, I wonder if I would have been better at layouts, if I would have been better at perspective, if I would have been better at this, if I was 100% focused on just that and not dividing my time between both my schoolwork and doing parodies on Newgrounds at the same time. but that was my life decision. I have to live with that, for better or worse. But on that same note, I would say if you are, and it's I don't even say this as, privilege. I think it's great if you're in a financially, you and your family, because often, if your family, not always, but your family can often, help you with, getting into college in the first place and being afforded. My folks certainly helped me out, and then I earned everything to pay off my debt myself over the decade that followed that. But what I would say is if you're in a financially viable spot to be able to go to, say, an SVA or a CalArts or a SCAD or a Sheridan, whatever, put everything into it, because it is so much, I would say, more about what you put into it than, what they're giving you. Like, you have to put your full force into, like, getting the most out of it, so that, the thousands of dollars will be ultimately worth it in the end.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. You absolutely have to be dedicated. You can't just coast by.
But even if you can't do that, educate yourself. It's true. We are very lucky now that even the cesspool sites that are littered with problems like Twitter and YouTube and Tumblr and the like, they are also godsends for information. And being able to learn how to do most anything. So make use of that before the sun explodes. What a great note to end on, Chris. Anyway, I think that's probably going to do it. So I hope that this was helpful to answering that question. I hope that this was helpful to anybody out there. If you happen to be, in your final year of high school, or maybe you're getting close to finishing and you're thinking about college, you're thinking about what you want to do next, and if you are, choosing to watch our psychotic path of being an artist, I hope that this has been helpful in some way. I haven't done, one like this in many years, but I used to really enjoy, the dangers of your own art style and, getting through high school when you get bullied, those kind of things. These are always some of my favorite kind of Kirblog topics to do, and I was very happy to have another more, I would say, more educated, more worldly perspective than my own. So thank you, Ashley, for taking the time out to be here for this.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before we go, please plug your stuff. Where can people go find stuff about Farfetched and your art? And I know you were saying you were thinking about maybe getting back into streaming drawing and stuff again soon, etc.
You can find me at Ash Nichols Art, ASHNICHOLS Art, on Twitter. That is where I am mainly at, or just Ashley Nichols Art everywhere else, basically. I am actually Nichols on Tumblr. I post there sometimes, whatever platform you like using, just look up Ashley Nichols Art. You'll find me. And yeah, I have my own animated series that we're working on called Far Fetched. And that's just Far Fetched Show at Twitter. And if you want links to everything for that and more information on that, farfetched.show is the website for that.
Oh.
And I have my own YouTube channel as well, where I do a podcast with a bunch of industry folks called Honeycast, HUNICAST. So you can check that out if you want. But yeah, ultimately, I hope this was helpful to people. And yeah, long short of it, if you can afford to go, go. If you can't, do not worry about it. It's okay. You can still make it regardless.
Yes, your dreams do not have to be memes. So
exactly.
And we believe in you. And you know what? We hope that we'll get to work with you someday out there. Anybody who, if you did get anything out of this and if this was helpful, we hope that maybe we'll be working together on something with you someday, because that's the dream, truly. So, yeah. Excellent. All right, we're going to end here. I think I have surgery in a couple days after this goes up, so
oh no,
Lamau. Yeah, I'm trying to get back to be able to have the ability to draw in the first place.
Godspeed. Okay, yeah, this is another life lesson for you. I know we said apply yourself, but don't work yourself into needing surgery on your arm.
Don't do what Christopher did. Oh, yeah, please. Oh my gosh. All right, everybody, we'll catch you on the next one. Once again, if you would like to suggest Kirblog topics like this in the future, or be in our Patreon Discord server. We had a couple here, Julian Hobbs, Kurilu Stromboli, and Viola Raragi listening in at the moment. Thanks, you guys. And thanks once again to OTUF for this question. If you want to be part of this stuff in the future, patreon.com/Kirbifer. You have a Patreon too, I think, don't you?
Yeah, just Ashley Nichols Art on Patreon.
Yes.
That it says Ashley Nichols Art, but that is the Far-Fetched Patreon.
Right.
So you get to see all sorts of behind-the-scenes production.
Yes, and it's going to be real cool. There's some very, very awesome people involved with this thing, and I can't wait to see it. So, all right, folks, we'll catch you later. Thanks so much. That's it for me. That's for Ashley, and we'll see you on the next one. Fare thee well.